Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation and Part 2 of my Marvel Legends Maximum Spider-Man Deep Dive. Today is all about comparisons. For the purpose of this video, I want to spotlight some alternate figure lines, his most fearsome villains, supporting characters, other heroes and team-ups, and alternate Spider-Man costumes. First up, and let's break the ice by seeing what other toy lines this Spidey scales with. Starting with other Hasbro lines, and for fellow New York hero and Egghead, here we have Egon Spangler from the Ghostbusters Plasma series, but also rocking the beige is the Revenge of the Sith Obi-Wan Kenobi from the Star Wars Black series, and Raiders of the Lost Ark from the Indiana Jones Adventure series. Next up is the Power Rangers Lightning Collection SPD Green Ranger, the G.I. Joe Classified series Storm Shadow, and the short-lived starting lineup series Joel Embiid. I'm not a basketball fan exactly, I just picked it up from Ollie's to give it a test drive. Of course, now that 20th Century Fox is also owned by Disney, it only makes sense to bring out the Lanyard Toys Alien Warrior and the Jungle Hunter Predator. Switching companies to Mattel though, and here's the Amber Collection Jurassic World Owen Grady. And then for wrestling comparison, and here's Randy Orton, which was a gift from friend of the channel JB Toyman Figure Reviews, and He-Man from the Masterverse Revelation series. Switching the nostalgia gears though, and here's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles by NECA. This is the movie version, and the Playmates Street Fighter 2-pack version. That segues perfectly to the Playmates Ryu and Chun-Li, bringing us to Dhalsim and M. Bison by Jada. Lastly for this category, and for some comparisons to the distinguished competition, here we have Batman from DC Universe Classics, the Mafex Night Crusader Batman, DC Essentials Nightfall, which isn't too bad when you remember that Spider-Man is 5'10" and Batman is 6'4", but then the DC Multiverse Nightfall Batman is pushing it a bit. Still, if you just want to do some figure photography, I do think you could make it work. Next up are the villains. First up, and we have to start with a couple of Green Goblins. I don't have a Hasbro Hobgoblin, but I do have Demo Goblin, which is appropriate for the 90s. But for one of Webhead's other arch enemies, and here we have Dr. Octopus. Next up is classic and 90s versions of the Vulture, and a couple of Kraven the Hunters. This brings us to retro card versions of the Lizard. Boy, do we need a McFarlane one. The very well painted Mysterio, Electro, Flint Marko, the Sandman, Scorpion with his bendy tail, and since it's the 90s, here's Silvermane from the Amazon 5-pack. Next up is a few versions of Venom. In general, I think I like the Walmart version the best, but that first one does feel really appropriate for a McFarlane Spider-Man. Of course, where there's Venom, we have to bring out a couple of versions of Carnage. For a couple of bigger baddies though, and here we have the Rampaging Rhino and Wilson Fisk the Kingpin. This brings us to Tombstone and Hammerhead, and lastly, Shocker. What? I only do the Scream for Black costume Spider-Man. Before we continue, just a quick reminder that I'm giving a new in-box Maximum Spider-Man away to one lucky subscriber. To enter, check out my review of Maximum Spider-Man, which you can click on at the end of this video. Next up is some Spider-Man supporting characters. First up is Felicia Hardy, the Black Cat, who looks great with this Maximum Spider-Man. But for Peter's one true pairing, we have to bring out Mary Jane Watson. The one in the green coat is Gwen Stacy with an alternate MJ head, bringing us to Gwen Stacy herself and a couple of versions of Spider-Gwen. Next up is a few versions of Miles Morales. Objectively, the Gamerverse figure is the best, but doesn't really go well with your comic display. If you saw my retro card video, you know I'm not a big fan of that guy, so for my money, Space Venom Wave might still be the best. That said, if you can appreciate Miles' more modern look, here's that. And while this may or may not be the best category for him, here we have Spider-Boy, along with the retro card J. Jonah Jameson, and finally, just a few Peters Parker. Retro card is probably going to be your best bet, though for my money, I still think the best Peter Parker figure is still probably ahead of us. Next up, we're going to look at some other heroes and team-ups. For one of Spidey's most frequent team-ups, and here we have Daredevil. From left to right is Hobgoblin Wave, Man Without Fear 3-pack, and 90s style Armored. Next up is Ninja Spider-Man, Deadpool. I don't have Punisher, but for some other common Spider-Man team-ups, and here we have Blade, Ghost Rider, and Shang-Chi, though I think we know the fellow heroes Spidey is the closest to are the Fantastic Four. This is the Walgreens version, bringing us to Ben Grimm and the New Avengers. This includes Captain America. Here we have 80 years, 20th anniversary, and Ultimate. As for Iron Man, and here's the Model 9, the Modular Armor, and the Model 20, and then rounding out my figures for the team were Miss Marvel, Spider-Woman, and Bob. Wolverine, of course, bridges the gap between New Avengers and X-Men. Here we have 97, Astonishing, and Juggernaut Wave, and for some other X-Men, and here's Beast, Cyclops, and Storm. For one last X-Men, and here's the retro card Iceman, along with Spider-Man's other amazing friend, Firestar, but for just a couple of other Avengers, and here's 80 Years and Thunderstrike versions of Thor and the Incredible Hulk. Lastly, and let's web it up with some alternate Spider-Man costumes. First up, and we've got to look at the symbiote costume. Secret Wars might be my favorite, but the proportions match the closest on this guy. That said, I do like how the retro card adds some bulk, but it also depends on how you see Peter Parker's age. Peter was a teenager when he was bitten back in Amazing Fantasy 15, so it stands to reason he'd still be growing and his body would still be changing. If he had the black costume at this stage, he could have still been changing into what we'd recognize as the McFarlane version, and who knows, maybe his body would continue to change with age. The next major costume, of course, would be Ben Reilly. I do think the Mafex is probably the best, but once again, I do think the proportions and colors match best on the Hobgoblin Wave version. Thanks to that bulky hoodie though, and there's a bit more wiggle room with Scarlet Spider. For my money, either the retro card or the Mafex is probably going to be your best bet here. For something a bit more advanced though, and here's his armor, which looks a little short by comparison, that brings us to the Iron Spider. Since it is an armor, I have no problem with it adding some bulk, so this works okay for me. And then we have the Superior Spider-Man, which works a lot better than I was expecting. All that said, there is one final comparison I'd like to close with today that just feels right. Spider-Man co-creator Stan Lee. Which combination was your favorite? Sound off in the comments below, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss part 3 of my deep dive, Head Swaps. If you like this video, check out one of these. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.